Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, we have a special presentation. We're going to be talking about the world's oldest serving military cartridge, as in still in use today, after a long amount of time, all right? So we're going to break into this a bit, and we're going to be talking about 7.62 by 54 rimmed, all right? We've already done a similar video to this, but I thought an update would be sort of pertinent, just because I've got some cool stuff to show you. And I would definitely like to take a moment to thank the folks at Sonoran Desert Institute. They've got some great gunsmithing programs. If you want to learn more about firearms technology, gunsmithing, reloading, things like this, check them out. Great group of people. So let's dive right into this subject a little bit. Without going on a huge, long-winded thing, all right, we're just going to say that this cartridge has been in service since around 1890, 1891, all right? So, long-standing military service cartridge. It was originally developed as a smokeless cartridge. It is one of the earliest smokeless cartridges to ever serve in military. It was designed in France around the Mosin-Nagant. The early M91 Mosin rifles were produced in France under contract. And you know, the French were really the first people to develop smokeless powder in use in a small bore rifle cartridge. The 8mm Lebel arguably is one of the longest running smokeless cartridges there is, but it doesn't meet the criteria for this video because it's not in service anymore. 54R is still in service, still in use all around the world. It's still chambered in sniper rifles, machine guns, and everything like that. I mean, this cartridge served through two world wars, numerous conflicts. Basically, every single conflict, with the exception of a few that have been fought over the last 100 or so years, have involved this cartridge. All right, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the Viet Cong used them. They were used in Korea, right? I mean, used in modern conflicts all the way up through probably yesterday, somebody got in a gunfight with this cartridge. Okay, so it's been in use a really long time. Why though? I mean, why in the world would this cartridge have such predominant use throughout all the countries of the world and still remain a popular cartridge to this day? So let's talk about the things its pros and its cons, right? Okay, so what are some of the things that might be viewed as a con in today's world, right? You know, you're not going to find very many militaries wanting to chamber a gun in a rimmed cartridge, all right? So that's one thing instantly, right out the gate, that we have to go on. It is a rimmed cartridge, which for a modern cartridge is kind of odd. You know, you're not really going to see very many militaries want to chamber a gun in a rimmed cartridge anymore, but it still remains in use. Well, why though? It's just so strange to think. Well, the reason is because when these countries produce this ammo, they stockpiled millions and millions and millions of rounds of this stuff. So there's so much surplus out there in the world that it makes sense for especially a lot of third world countries to develop machine guns and adopt and use machine guns that chamber this cartridge because the ammo is plentiful, it can be found pretty easily, and in a lot of the satellite communist countries or countries that support communism, a lot of times this ammunition is given out as war aid anyway to support nations that are fighting against people like us on the Western world, okay? And it happens, right? There's like these proxy wars that happen where, you know, the communist nations will supply countries that are sympathetic to their views and their cause with ammunition and firearms chambered in the original issue calibers. So that's why you see things like the PKM remain in service. It is actually one of the best general purpose machine guns in the world, okay? I had a chance to shoot one recently at Drive Tanks, and it's actually a really good machine gun. It's functional, accurate, perfect rate of fire, stupid easy to use, okay? So let's backtrack a little bit. You know, back early on, smokeless powder was making this really big sort of revolution all around the world. So armies were really quick to go, holy crap, we've got to get on board with this smokeless powder bandwagon, right? Because previously, lots of cartridges used black powder, oftentimes a large, heavy projectile with a very elliptical trajectory. Now, there were a few militaries that were experimenting with some much flatter shooting black powder cartridges, such as the Swiss, with the 41 Swiss cartridge. That was a great example of a flat shooting small bore black powder round. You know, there were some experimentations done with 40 caliber Martini Henry rifles at the time. Of course, there were repeaters such as the 11 millimeter Mauser, which still fired a slow and anemic black powder round, but they were offering firearms like that in a repeater configuration to give the soldiers faster follow-up shots, increased ammo capacity. And so a lot of militaries didn't want to get left behind, right? So once the French came out with 8mm Lebel, the rest of the world was kind of like, okay, the French have got a really cool idea here with a much flatter shooting gun, and now we need to, you know, everyone wants to develop this small bore, smokeless rifle round, and that's what many countries did. You know, Germany went with the 8mm Mauser. You know, we went with 30-06 Springfield eventually, which we really stole like the Mauser idea from the Germans anyway. To develop our 03, we more or less stole the Mauser. That's another story for another day. But then, of course, the Russians wanted their own version too. So, again, getting back to 54R, one of the reasons that the cartridge has held on and stood the test of time so long is because it was chambered in a wide variety of different firearms. And even back then, they were developing carbines, long guns. Now, this is a 9130 service rifle. So this wasn't designated till around 1930. That's where it gets its designation, M91 of 1930. So this was a modification to the original 91 service rifle that was made in 1930 to make the gun a little bit lighter weight, easier to handle, easier to point and shoot, and overall cheaper to mass produce than the original 91s. The original 91 Dragoons were a much longer rifle, and with the bayonet attached, of course, very, very long and cumbersome. So there were many, many changes made to the Mosin series of firearms over the years. But, of course, whenever they made a change, they kept a lot of the older guns in surplus and in stock as well. And they didn't make a ton of changes to the ammunition. They did make some changes to bullet weights and velocities as improvements in powders and different bullet combinations were found. You know, they did experiment with, you know, obviously making the cartridge a little bit more powerful, okay, and flatter shooting for the 9130. That's why you see the change of the sights and everything. But even when they made those changes, they kept a lot of the original article firearms in surplus, as well as ammunition, right? So one of the reasons that 54R is still a military cartridge, surplus, right? They would surplus their firearms, they would surplus the ammunition, move on, and they would keep cranking them out and keep making them, okay? I mean, even into World War II. World War II was raging on, and the Russians were still cranking out all the dang guns they could. Machine guns, pistols, rifles, anti-tank weapons, tanks, right? Everything. Their whole doctrine was to dominate the enemy through sheer numbers, right? And in many cases they did. Now, in some cases they didn't fare so well, like in Finland in '39, you know. Yes, they did gain some territory from Finland, but it cost them dearly, all right? Just enough land to bury their dead, okay? So the Russians definitely had some interesting tactics, and part of that tactic was for them to arm a lot of men with a lot of guns and to put them out there and get a bunch of bodies with guns in their hands. All right. So without getting too much on firearms development, because we're really talking about the cartridge here, this is an M39 service rifle. Which is a very, very refined Mosin. This really is like the Cadillac of the Mosin family. They use really good barrels, nice slick actions, really nice Arctic birch stocks that are two-piece. And this particular one has a straight comb stock, which is really cool. Anyway, without getting into too many details, we will discuss the ammo a little bit. All right, so the cool thing about 54R is from a surplus standpoint, not only is it in common use today in terms of being surplused out, it's actually commercially supported still as well, all around the world. There's so many guns chambered in this cartridge that it has ensured that the viability and longevity of the cartridge has remained and will remain, even in military service, for a long time. I mean, there's still third world countries out there that issue bolt guns because it's what they've got. You know, maybe Rear D troops are still using bolt guns. There's still designated marksmen, they're using guns like the PSL and the Dragunov. You know, this is a designated marksman rifle. This is a 10-shot mag, 54R, semi-auto, okay? Really cool stuff. And so that's a really interesting thing. And these guns are still in use today. There's still DMRs out there being fielded by sharpshooters that fill that role within the military. You know, the Dragunov and variants of which is still being issued to snipers and designated marksmen in today's military. Of course, like we mentioned, machine guns. So let's talk a little bit about the ammo, all right? And I do have some cool things to show you that you may not know existed. All right, we're just going to kind of start over here on this side. This is a stripper clip of 147 grain Russian light ball. We've got this ammo sitting here on a spam can. Now the way that the ammo is packaged, you can see here we've got a full PSL magazine loaded up with light ball, okay? The ammo comes packaged in these tins, okay? And they come with like a little spam can. They come in a wooden crate with 2 of these tins, 880 rounds to a crate. And you've got these little spam can openers. It's literally a can opener. You work it down the edge and you open the can up. And I don't have a complete package to show you, but it comes wrapped in paper, okay? Relatively crude packaging, but it's stood the test of time quite well. And of course, on the lid of these spam cans, you wind up having a whole series of metrics and information that tell you when the ammo was made, how many rounds are in the tin that you're picking up, the cartridge that's in the tin, the factory or country code, okay, where it was made. You also have a bullet and powder lot number that is associated with them, as well as a general date when it was produced, okay? Just really cool. And that way, if there's a particular issue with a lot of ammo, they can trace it back to, okay, it was this lot of powder that was bad or something. So all of the bullet, powder lot numbers, factory code, date, cartridge, all of that is listed on the top of the spam can. And that's common for all military surplus coming out of the communist bloc. Doesn't matter if it's 54R, doesn't matter if it's 545, doesn't matter if it's 762 by 39, 762 by 25 Tokarev. All ammo that is packaged in this manner will have a very similar system for coding what the ammunition is. Okay, so that's your Russian light ball. This is actually a really, really rare, these are extremely rare, okay? This is a frangible projectile in 311 diameter intended for use in the 54R. Now, I bought a bunch of this military pooled brass, and this is Berdan primed, okay? And a bunch of these projectiles, and these were produced for on contract for the Canadian military for weapons familiarization of COMBLOC weaponry. And it was a contract that never got filled, and I wound up buying a huge lot of these projectiles. And they're cool. You can shoot steel with them up close. They're really safe, and they don't really skip off the berm. They pretty much disintegrate when they hit a hard surface. That's something you don't see every day. I thought I'd show that off. All right, here we have a round of Polish light ball. So an interesting fact about all of the military ammunition in a 54R that you're going to encounter, it all has the country code and sometimes a date on the back of the case. There's so many variants of this ammunition, okay, that there's literally books written on this subject. We're talking hundreds of different varieties of ammunition, and they all have a unique head stamp. Each head stamp generally will have the country code. If you look through the list of country codes, you can determine which country that came from. It's like a country code 10, I believe, is like Bulgaria, right? Or it may be Poland or Russia or whatever, right? So you'll have a country code. So like on the bottom of this one is a country code 11, I believe. I want to say this is Polish light ball, if I'm not mistaken, okay? So that's a Polish light ball round. Here we've got a Russian light ball round, okay? And then you get into a lot of the commercially available 54R. It's still loaded by a wide variety of different people. Here is a special subsonic round. This is a hand load that uses 174 grain match king. So Sierra still makes 174 grain 311 projectiles that shoot excellent. And this one just happens to be dumbed down to a sub. Here we have a factory Winchester 180 grain soft point. So you've got a good viable hunting round. The power that the cartridge develops is definitely on par with like 30-06, 8mm. All of the military cartridges from like World War II, World War I era in a full-length rifle configuration all generate pretty similar energies. So expect power very similar to an 06, okay? Case capacity on this cartridge for hand loading, pretty good. It holds a fair amount of powder. I wouldn't say the case capacity trumps Alt-6, but it's certainly a generous case that can hold a good bit of powder, and the actions are really strong. I've never seen a Mosin fail for any reason, especially an M39, so that can be loaded, you know, pretty hot. All right, next to it, we have a 180 grain FMJ from Winchester. So both the 180 grain FMJ and soft point are still produced by Winchester, what we call the white box ammo, like you see here in the white box, okay? All right, this is a special round here. We're using Lapua 7.62 by 53 brass, okay? And we're loading a 200 grain D166 projectile on Vitivory powder, and this replicates the D166 ball ammo, 200 grain ammo that was fielded in the finished M39 that you see right in front of me. So this is a specialized round, and Lapua still produces the D166 projectile, and it's produced exactly the same as it was during World War II. So very consistent. They were issuing exceptional projectiles back in the day for their service rifles, and that projectile is still available. Okay, that's the D166. It has a very unique and deliberate ogive shape. Okay, if you compare the ogives on these, it's a very fat ogive, and that's why when you look at finished service rifles, you look on the top, you're going to see a marking that says D. Okay, it'll usually have a D, which means that the chamber has been opened up to accept, or the lead of the rifle has been opened up to accept the D shank bullet, okay? All right, right here next to it, we have a 203 grain Bernal soft point. This is a very cheap and economical hunting round that's available for the 54R. I have shot pigs with this round. It does exceptionally well. It penetrates great. And when you shoot this on a gun that's outfitted with a suppressor, it's pretty quiet. You know, it's hearing safe, even despite being full velocity. And it is absolutely devastating on pigs, okay? Next to it here, we have a Wolf 147 grain light ball. This particular round is also a very economical and cheap to shoot round that is meant to kind of replicate the performance and velocities of the original 147 grain light ball ammunition that we see here, okay? And also a lot of indoor shooting ranges prefer that you stay away from the steel core ammo or anything with a mild core. This ammo has a lead core, so that's one of the other things, and it's non-corrosive. Here we just have a piece of brass from that Canadian lot that I showed you earlier, and then this is one of our frangible projectiles here for size reference. Okay, so we'll quickly discuss the difference between Berdan primed and boxer primed, okay, and then also corrosive versus non-corrosive. Now this might be getting into a little bit more of a vein than people want in this video, but I thought we would discuss it. So with boxer prime, you have one centralized flash hole in the center, okay? So you can take a decapping rod and a standard die, and you can push the old primer right out, and it's really, really easy to reload. And a Berdan prime, what you have is not only a series of different size primers, which makes sourcing primers very difficult, but the two flash holes are actually offset from the center, so it's not very easy to decap a Berdan primed case. So getting to the point here is that it's another odd thing that not only is this a military cartridge that's still in use, it's Berdan primed and it's rimmed. Two very archaic things, especially for a modern military sourcing modern equipment and ammunition. Again, because they have so much of it, it just makes sense to continue chambering guns in it because they probably have more than they're ever going to be able to shoot in 2 lifetimes. That's one reason it's so predominant. Okay, now corrosive versus non-corrosive, the priming compounds that they use. So with a corrosive primer, you're going to run into a primer that's going to have very long shelf life compared to some of the boxer primers, and these primers are sealed really well. Usually you'll see this red sealant around the base of the primer, and that helps seal it in from moisture and everything like that. But the compounds in the Berdan primers have a very good shelf life. So they choose that because of its long shelf life. All right. Now the problem with corrosive primers is that they do leave some salts and other nasty residues in the barrel, and if it's left unchecked, the barrel will rust into a giant sewer pipe full of frothing red rust. You have to follow up with like some hot soapy water or some really good solvent and make sure that those salts are neutralized and gotten out of the barrel. So I guess they figured, hey, we'll just be really hard on our troops to take care of their guns, and we'll issue Burdam primed corrosive ammunition because we want to buy it and make it cheap and stack it deep. All right, so non-corrosive, you know, there's a lot of ammo that's you know, touted as being non-corrosive, but it still is, right? Like, you know, the original M2 ammunition for the M1 Garand, it is corrosive. Okay, you want to treat it like it's corrosive, because I've seen some of it not really have a problem. I've seen some of it rust the gun to heck and back. So don't ever trust something just because it says it's boxer primed, non-corrosive. Always, always, always take a quick moment to clean your rifle. Don't trust that it's non-corrosive. But generally with non-corrosive primers, you're supposed to be able to generally not have to worry about cleaning quite as stringently as you do with the non-corrosive, but I would treat it as corrosive, especially if it comes from a con-block country. Like even this Wolf or Barnaul, I'd still clean. Absolutely. You know, because it's still Burdam primed. And I mean, they say it's non-corrosive, but I'd clean. All right, so that's really about it. You know, that's really the main reasons that 54R has held on for so long is literally the war of logistics. All right, the logistics of, hey, we got a lot of guns. The logistics of, hey, we're creating new guns based around this old cartridge because we have so much of the dang ammo. And then, all right, well, do we continue fielding this or develop something new? Well, of course they're going to continue to field it as long as it works, it's functional. Of course, they have no telling how many extra parts laying around, ammunition. So these guns just stand the test of time from a military component because they have so much in surplus. And then the ammunition, until they shoot up all the 54 ammo in the entire world in terms of the 54R, it's going to be a predominant military cartridge. The same thing with 7.62 by 39. I guarantee you that 7.62 by 39 will be in use 150, 200 years after its development. Now, how long will the 54R surplus hold out? No telling. Now, do they still make 54R? Absolutely. There are still countries and their military components that still produce this cartridge because of its demand, because they have so much money and time invested and surplus of guns chambered in this cartridge. So I think that it speaks to the true testament of you know, what these countries do when they try to come up with a weapon system, right? When these con-block countries, they're thinking 100 years out, right? Like, we're going to develop a gun, we're going to stockpile it, we're going to build a bunch of them. And they've always had the mentality of preparing for this huge, great war that could be at their doorstep the next day. Pretty pragmatic approach if you think about it. And I'm not going to say they're necessarily wrong, right? Because if something goes down, they can uncrate all these guns, pass out stripper clips of ammo. Now, granted, it's a bolt gun, but they got a lot of them. And, you know, you can't go wrong with a rifle behind every blade of grass. And, you know, their mentality is not unlike the way that a lot of countries have approached the United States over the years. You know, our mainland not being invaded because there'll be a rifle behind every blade of grass. And that really does ring strong and true for the con-block nations, and that's why the 54R has remained in service for so many years, and it's going to be around for a long time. So, guys, we hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for watching. This was meant to be just kind of a special fireside chat about the 54R and its longevity. So, you know, we love our con-blocks here on this channel. So thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate the support from you. All the folks who support us on Patreon, thank you so very much for the support. Those of you who purchase man cans, t-shirts over on Ballistic Ink, knives or other merchandise over on our website, thank you so much for believing in what we do, seeing value in what we do, and supporting our channel. Many more videos on the way. We hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know if you'd like me to kind of break down other cartridges in the kind of vein of this same idea. We'll be happy to do it. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Many more videos on the way, guys.